What's up, gamers? It's your boy Waffles back at it again with another video. I know it's been a bit since I've uploaded. That is because I've been fucking around and I have been finding out. And the finding out has not been as fun as was advertised. I'm actually kind of enjoying this distribution. It's alright. So, you may remember I got a fucking 3090 from Mariah. And this thing has been the bane of my fucking existence for like the last fucking year. Or half year, however the fuck long I've had this thing. Everybody always tells me, they're like, dude, just switch back to your AMD card. And I'm like, no, I'm not gonna switch back to my AMD card. You can't make me. But, you know, because there's things I want to do that are NVIDIA related that I'll never do because I'm lazy. Anyways, but I was like, oh, I'm gonna follow this, open Kmod development and see if that improves the situation at all. But one thing that I've been looking at is which distributions fucking work on NVIDIA correctly. So I've had issues. I'm gonna start listing off all the fucking issues I've had. Ubuntu seemed to work correctly. Linux Mint, however, Cinnamon had some issues where, like, if I was gaming, my games would, like, freeze every now and then for some reason. I don't fucking know why. On Gentoo, I installed Mate, and even with the compositor, and if I put VSync in my game, but I had a full screen game running, I would still, it would screen tear like a motherfucker. It was like the laggiest shit I've ever seen. And CachyOS worked pretty well. I still got that on another drive. I need to migrate my SSH keys over to this new distribution I'm on, though. I'm on fucking NixOS again. And that is because I got WoW working, even though I'm probably not going to play WoW for much longer. Just because I got the gear I wanted. I don't really care much about raiding. I don't do Nax, so what the fuck, what do I care? But NixOS has been interesting, because, if all you're doing is installing programs, it's not super hard. The problem is my config file. I break this thing, like, every time I try to add something. So this is basically a list of all my packages up here. This is everything in my file, and then I've got a bunch of shit that I need. Where's my, here's Vencord. This is all CD record stuff. I ended up getting rid of that, though. I needed, they're suggesting I install Vim. I haven't actually looked through this entire file yet, but I actually migrated this. Here's Steam, here's Flatpak, even though I'm not using any Flatpaks. There's NVIDIA. All this shit is just setting up NVIDIA with the open Kmods, and so far it has worked pretty flawlessly. So the problem with Gentoo I had was I wanted to use KDE with Wayland because X11 just had issues with Compositor. I don't know what the issue was, but I decided to install KDE Plasma on Gentoo, and they were on Plasma 6 at the time. But I noticed that it would crash like every day, and my screen would just go black, but all my windows would stay up. So I think it was something like KRunner, whatever the window manager was, or desktop or whatever. Something was crashing and it wasn't relaunching, even though that's supposed to be a built-in KDE feature. So I was very confused. I was like, hey, this isn't happening on CachyOS. I notice it's crashing on CachyOS sometimes, but it like relaunches immediately. So what's up with that? And so I switched over to NixOS, and they seem to have the same whatever the fuck it is that relaunches things. I haven't seen it crash yet, but I'm assuming it probably is crashing at some point. But it's able to relaunch, I just haven't noticed. Maybe it's because I'm not really interacting with my computer as much, because I noticed it would happen when I press certain buttons like Windows key or something. I don't know. But NixOS has been interesting because there is a lot of fucking shit you gotta deal with. So, like, okay, how do you know that this works, for instance? Like, okay, so here's a bracket, here's a semicolon, here's a bracket. Here is an open bracket, here's a semicolon, here is a close bracket, parenthesis, no semicolon, even though there's a semicolon parenthesis up here. And then there's a close bracket, semicolon, and that was how I got it working. Some people say that my configuration is pretty cursed and I gotta run like a formatter, and I probably will, because things are just kind of scattered around right now. I've got all this stuff too, like app images needed to run. I got what else? What is this thing that I had to install? I had to put something for. Let me check. What the fuck do you mean K3D? Oh, K3B. Alright, K3B. So this is everything I need for K3B. Oh, yeah. It's all just one line now instead of being whatever the fuck I had down here with all the CD record shit. It's very confusing. The way NixOS handles permissions, you have to like add yourself to groups within this file. You can't use like gpassword or anything, and programs can't use gpassword either, which is how they're configured a lot of the time. If they have a way to do that, which K3B does. If you never use K3B, it's a disk burner. And I was using that because I have this second computer and it's an old i7 Bloomfield kind of thing. And, well, I'm trying to set up XP on it, and I had to burn a Windows XP CD. And it all worked, but it took me fucking forever to get to that point, like seriously. Because there's several different packages you can install. I think there's two. One of them is KDE packages.k3b. The other one is this, which is just K3B. Programs K3B, I think. Yeah, programs K3B. And one of those, the programs K3B, pulls in all these wrappers. I'm going to go into K3B and show you. So on here, you go to settings, configure, programs. So you have to change manually your CD RDAO and your CD record. You have to change them to run wrappers bin, and that's where your stuff is located. Without that, you don't have permissions or something. It was very confusing. Oh yeah, and I still had to add my user to CD-ROM. Yeah, so I have user waffles, and I'm in Network Manager wheel CD-ROM. If I type in groups, I'm in users wheel CD-ROM and Network Manager. And that was confusing too, because it's not just a log out, log in thing. You have to like actually reboot. It's very confusing. So anyways, yeah, I'm on NixOS because it is one of the distros that seems to work with NVIDIA quite well. One thing I noticed though is Gojim. Gojim is a XMPP client, and I'm using it, but Gojim was updated to like 3.3, 2.3.3 or something. I don't know. But I am on the older 2.2, which didn't get the GTK4 update yet, which some people would like. But I was like, why don't they have the new version even in unstable? It seems like the package is maintained by somebody else, honestly. That's what I think it was. So anyways, yeah, NixOS is kind of interesting. It seems like a more stable distribution. I just can't fucking wrap my head around this configuration file. All these brackets and closing brackets and shit. There's like 3 different types of parentheses. There's semicolons in weird places. I can never figure out where the hell they go and where they don't go. That's been very confusing. I'm not really much of a programmer, so I don't really get programming syntax, which seems to be how this file is created. That might be something that I don't really like so much about NixOS, is that it seems like it's made for developers specifically that kind of know what they're doing already. Because the error messages aren't really any help to me. It just kind of vaguely tells me kind of where the error I'm having is, but it can't tell me exactly where. So the error messages aren't really that useful. I've joined the NixOS Discord. They kicked me out of the Matrix for some reason. I just logged in one day, and for some reason they kicked everybody out and then said join the new group, and then they never invited anybody to the new group. So I joined the Discord instead because it seems like they have a bit less issues. But everybody, sometimes they're helpful, but I need a lot of spoon feeding and they don't really like that, you know? That's been an issue. But I do have NixOS running, but and there is this one guy, he kept telling me, oh, if you have any issues, just let me know. I'll help you through them. But the issues I run into are stuff he won't be using. And that's kind of the thing with Linux distributions is unless your use case is highly specialized and like you do a lot of different things, or like rather, if your use case is very diversified, you can run into more issues than people that run a very small set of tasks. That's what I noticed about there was two guys from the Linux Cast Discord. One of them used Debian, like Debian stable, and the other one used Pop! OS stable, or rather the phase 2 of LTS. And they would always do their little sip emojis. I call it the Reddit emoji. And they would always talk about how great, everybody should be using Pop! OS LTS from 2024, 2023, whatever the fuck. Which I was surprised because the Mint LTS, or rather the current Mint version, is from like 2022, but they're still in phase 1 of support. Whereas Pop! OS, since they're moving to Cosmic, they haven't really done a lot of updates on their packages. And so I told them, I said, I can't recommend this distribution to anybody. You can hack, or I don't really know what to call that attitude. People that use the sip emoji are like the epitome of cringe. Like seriously, if you're one of those people, like consider stop using the sip emoji because it just comes off as like really condescending and pretentious. Like just saying, it's I don't know. I'm sure I'm not the only person that finds those emojis kind of, I can't really call it offensive, but I don't know, for lack of a better word, it's the kind of people that use sip emoji are very, very strange people, and you usually don't want to get in an argument with them. Anyways, these people are fucking retarded. No, I'm kidding. Anyways, he talks a lot about Pop! OS, and he says, what do you mean you can't recommend the distro? I use it every day. I'm like, I don't give a fuck what you use it for. I said, I ran the distro, and within about 10 minutes, I fucking broke the thing. Like, I just broke the shit out of it. So, like, if I were to give this to anybody, like, especially new users, because that's usually what I end up doing, is new users will ask me, what distribution should I use? And I have a hard time answering that because I actually do, not only do I use these distributions, I try to install distributions on several different machines when I have them. Right now I don't have any laptops, so if you have any laptops, let me know. The last one that got sent to me fucking got destroyed in the mail. Anyways, but I will not only test things myself, but I will ask other people, and I'll say, hey, can you run this distribution and tell me how you like it? Because I will run through every curveball I can throw it. I will use it for content creation, if you can even call this content creation. Fucking OBS on my desktop, yeah, I'm up there with all the fucking pros. But anyways, I'll ask them to run these distributions. I'll be like, hey, I like this distribution. Can you try to daily drive this for a while? And it'll be like people who are looking to distro hop, and I'll get very valuable feedback where they'll usually tell me I can't run this distro because I have this severe bug, and I'll say, oh shit, I didn't know that there was a bug with what do you have? And it seems to be like a laggy issue with a AMD CPU, AMD GPU, and since I don't have an AMD GPU, I've got NVIDIA, I wouldn't have fucking known that, But also, I run into a lot of NVIDIA-specific issues that only affect me and don't affect other people. So you can't really, you have to judge things based on throwing as many tests at it as possible, because trust me, if there is a way to break Linux, not only have I done it, but I've seen other people do it, And that's another thing that people always ask me is, why do you run such crazy hardware? Why do you run bleeding edge software? Why do you run these obscure distributions? And I say, well, one, I get to learn learn a lot of things. That's one reason I installed this NVIDIA card, was because I was like, okay, let's see how many bugs I can find just in NVIDIA specific stuff. And a lot of distro maintainers have said, oh yeah, we had no idea because we don't run NVIDIA cards. And so I'm in a few issue trackers about that. But where was I going with that? Anyways, but other people will. Where was I going with that? Jeez. Oh yeah, but not only am I learning things, but I'm also testing to see what I can find that works with not only my computer, but I want something that works with a lot of people's computers. And that's been kind of tricky, you know. It's been difficult to find a distribution that works perfectly for me for what I need it to do. I'd say CachyOS and NixOS have come the closest. I seem to be able to do pretty much everything on both these distributions. NixOS requires a lot more work, of course, but I'm used to that since I was running Gen 2 and all that. So, what was even the top? Oh yeah, I was just showing off NixOS. But yeah, I kind of went off on a tangent there. So anyways, yeah, I've been looking for distributions that work really well. And I think I've kind of narrowed it down to the ones I can, like, trust very well. I don't even know about Ubuntu, but Ubuntu generally does work no matter what you throw at it, as far as I know. I haven't heard a lot of people complain about Ubuntu, other than snaps, which I seem to always break. But if you can work around snaps, you're good. But NixOS seems to work pretty well for what it is. And CachyOS, kinda. It's a bit more advanced. It's kind of a more advanced distribution. Because obviously it's based on Arch, so it's got a lot of the Archisms. But could I recommend something to a new user? And that's been something I've struggled with. Is what do I give people for their first distribution? And that's a question that people get every day. They're like, what Linux distribution do I use? Oh yeah, I was gonna talk about Debian Stable. So I made a video on this I think I called it Debian Stable. And basically the people who I have had run Debian because they're like, oh, I just need my packages to work. I don't care about anything else. I don't care how old they are. I just need my packages to work. Well, that's the thing about stable packages, is packages get updated a lot, That's why Arch gets, like, updates every fucking day. Debian, their packages are very old. And you can install testing and SID and whatever, but then you're in unsupported territory, basically. You're in the testing environment, so expect breakages. It's no longer stable, so you have to run a more up-to-date distribution that's more stable. And that's where things like Fedora and maybe Tumbleweed, mixed bag on Tumbleweed. If you can get past it and it's stable, good for you. I had so many fucking breakages, it wasn't even funny. I think the last time I tried it, it broke a bit less, but I had trouble with the kernel. I don't know. It was confusing. But Debian, like, I would tell these people, oh yeah, just use, yeah, Debian's fine. And then they would come back to me and say, hey, I found a critical bug in the software. It's probably like a online service kind of software, something that has to connect to the internet. And they'll be like, hey, my package doesn't work. And I'm like, oh, well, did you file a bug? They're like, yeah, I posted a bug on the bug tracker. And then the developer comes back and they say, oh, just update your package that was fixed like 2 years ago. And you wouldn't know that unless you actually talk to people that use the software. I felt like that was what that moderator had problems with, was he kind of lived in his own little world. He didn't really, I don't think he talked to people that had a broad use case for their Linux distribution. And, that use their computer for computer things. That's a question I get a lot. Is what's the best for general purpose? What's the best for gaming? And really, that's why it's so hard to pick, is because you need something stable, but it needs to be up to date. You can't just give them old software, because then you'll end up like Pop OS, where your libraries are so out of date that your programs don't run. I also have but of course I told that to Nate. Nate's a real piece of work. He's like, he is a running joke on other Discords. Same thing with Matt. Like, holy fuck. I know he's a running joke on my channel, but he's a running joke on other people's channels too. Don't think I'm fucking unique. Shit, it's already been 20 minutes, goddamn. Anyways, so I was telling Nate that. I said, yeah, I was trying to run an app image, and it said, hey, your glibc is like out of date, and I don't see a way really to update this without switching over to Cosmic. And I don't want to use Cosmic because it's really bad for gaming right now, where stuff like alt tabbing doesn't work correctly. And it just like, I spontaneously combusted Cosmic in about 10 minutes. That was like the easiest thing I've ever broken in my life. And it was like a super catastrophic failure too. Oh my god. So anyways, Nate was like, oh, well, you're not supposed to run app images, right? I was like, what if I need to? What if somebody else needs to? Like, are you just gonna tell people don't fucking run app images? Like, what the fuck? We're already telling people to use Linux, so they're not gonna be able to use everything. Now you're telling them just don't fucking use a package format that is used especially by like Pro Tools and stuff, like I was using it for my 3D printer software. So, you can't talk to these people because they really do live in their own little world. They don't really have a broad view on Linux, and that's something that I've really tried over the years to get a grip on. Is I want to find bugs in the weirdest of places. I want to be the first person to have eyes on something in a while. And that was something I loved so much about Gentoo, was especially writing documentation, is there's so many things that I was able to correct or fix because I decided to do the test that nobody else would, And people, again, say I'm crazy for that. They're like, why would you voluntarily break your system and run all this crazy software? I'm like, well, somebody's got to do it. That's what it's like to be a volunteer. That's what it's like to do contribute back to the operating system you use, It's like Linus Torvalds said at one point. He said, this was like back in the 90s, he said, the users are the testers, whether they know it or not. By using the software, you are testing it. And the only difference between a contributor and a user is the contributor will report that information back to the developers, to get it fixed. And that's really what makes FOSS so interesting compared to proprietary software, honestly, is I never, like, the reason why Microsoft's software feels so broken or not very well tailored to the user base, is not only did they fire all their QA testers and had software engineers do their own QA testing, that was a mistake, but they, proprietary software does not necessarily mean that they get paid to listen to you. You know what I mean? Like, it's actually usually works in the inverse, where free software has to listen to the users because they are the ones using your software and they are the ones contributing back to it. So obviously community input is a huge factor in free software. Proprietary software, meanwhile, they get paid to make software that does the job, and whether that job is what you need or whether that job is what somebody else needs, that's kind of up to their judgment, So and I found that they don't really care about what the user wants, and you end up going years and years and years without basic functionality like upgrades or anything, updates. Like Photoshop didn't get the new formats like JPEG XL or I don't know what else. Fireworks never got the like JPEG XL, APNG, WebP, and all that. And I had to switch image editors because Fireworks was discontinued, and there was never a CS7 or a CC or whatever. And so I was just kind of stuck, you know. I didn't want to use Photoshop, and Photoshop was getting kind of annoying to crack, and they were adding a lot of online features to it that weren't really what I wanted out of my image editor, you know. Photoshop never really fit my use case, basically. And but basically, like, I never got that feeling from Microsoft that they cared about what the users needed, because I have a fucking list, and I remember my friend of a friend built his first gaming PC, and he said, you know, what kind of software should I install? And I gave him like a 10-mile long list of third-party open source free utilities for basic functionality on Windows. Stuff like a rich text editor, like for, you know, game modding and stuff. A proper video player, a proper audio player, a proper archive manager, a proper... what else? Image viewer, a proper... I don't know, web browser. There was... what the fuck else did I have? I had all this different shit that I needed to use. Oh yeah, image editor. I had him install codec packs. Like, fuck me, man. This is all stuff that is generally built into your Linux distribution. You know, comes out of the box. It just works. It's crazy. Unless you're using like a minimal distribution, and then you get to pick whatever one you want. But you know, it took so long for Microsoft to get WinRAR support. You know, where if you installed 7-zip, you had it right from the get-go. If you needed WebP support, it didn't come with Windows. You had to download Nomax or Honeyview or InfraView or whatever the fuck. Any of these third-party free utilities that did way more than what Microsoft was offering. They're not paid proprietary software. They're freeware. You know, they're free software. I don't know if all of them were open source, but I know they are all free, as in cost, you know? That's kind of the thing with Windows, is there's kind of a different culture, you know? You expect your software to be open source. Or, sorry, on Linux you expect your software to be open source, but on Windows you download a free utility and they don't even give you the source code. They're like, oh, here's the utility, it's free. There's like non-commercial use or whatever. And it's like, well, aren't you going to give us the source code or whatever? It's like, no. Why would you need that? So, anyways, yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to talk a bit about today. Is I've been trying out NixOS. It seems to work well on my hardware. I would need to talk to more people because my view on Linux is kind of warped and I'm still kind of new to this whole thing. So I don't have a firm grasp on everything yet. But you know, that's just whatever. Alright, yeah.